Hey, welcome to the Rhona podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates, for the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rhona. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, and maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Helena, welcome to the Rhona podcast. How are you?
Hi, Rhona. I'm very happy, and it's a good day today, and I'm excited to chat with you. I'm excited. There's so much going on and so much to do. So, we're just getting started. I know you do a lot of interesting things in sustainability, so I'm excited for this talk with you.
Amazing. Well, for the listeners, I'm delighted to welcome Helena Wasserman Eriksson. I do hope I pronounced that right. And I'm going to actually read out your bio, which is a bit, because I was trying to remember it all this morning, but there's so much great stuff. So I'm just going to read it out as a proper introduction. But Helena started her career with a passion around some of the world's kind of most precious global issues in climate, and started working at the Clinton Foundation and Ashoka. And I think a lot of that then drove your excitement around some of the technological opportunities that were in the world. And so you started working with Techstars and Big Data for humans. Today, you are on a mission to accelerate the transition of all things impact and sustainability through the lens of investing. So you currently work for top tier investments, and that focuses on global ecosystems and impact leaders. You're also an angel investor, so I'm sure we'll touch on that later, in the importance of female angel investors. You've got some great creds: Forbes 30 under 30 in 2017, one of the 50 most inspirational women in technology in 2017 in Europe, and elected founder of the Futures in 2016. So drop the mic. Huge kudos to you and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rhona. I'm excited to talk with you because, like I said, you've been doing this work for a really long time. And so last time we spoke, which was about 6 months ago, I was quite impressed by your insights. So I think, I see you as an expert. And so I'm excited to, I see this as a conversation for me also to gain more, to understand more where these investments need to go.
And it's amazing. And we're going to cover some great topics today around climate anxiety, the importance of funding female investors, and how we can actually get involved in that. So let's dive straight into the topic. So if we first address, and we all know the stats about empowering female investors and how that can unlock billions, I'd love to hear more about, specifically, I know you produced an article recently. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure this is something you're familiar with, but what's interesting is, there's a lot of studies about female investors and how there's actually a lot of obstacles in terms of becoming a female investor. And mostly there's a study that came out where they surveyed 200,000 female investors, and they asked, why were they not investing more, or like what was holding them back to becoming an investor to start with. And most of them said that it was a matter of confidence. And because they had, grown up with being told that, they didn't know how to manage money, they didn't know what they were doing, so they should just stay away from money. And I think that's something that a lot of us women grow up with. I mean, I can definitely relate myself to that. And so what's interesting is, we don't necessarily view female naturally as being good investors. But when you look at the data, so there have been several studies from Warwick University, UBS, and many others that show that actually when females do invest, they actually outperform male investors. So for me, that was a big, it was a surprise. I really didn't know that was the case. So it's interesting to see the data.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. But you're an investor yourself, right, Rhona?
I have invested, yes, yeah. But it was, for me, it was really scary for all those reasons. It was, I've done it 3 times now, and even now it's that mind talk and that, oh, it's not going to happen, or it won't work, or what right do I have, and all of these topics that come into your head, and understanding equity and VCs and angels. It's EIS and SEIS. It's just mind-blowing.
Exactly. And I think, what you're saying is exactly what I was feeling when I started as well. A few years ago, I felt like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Should I be doing this? While there's also a lot of studies that show that men, even if they don't know everything, they're much more confident at just going for it. So like imposter syndrome is much bigger in women than it is in men. And so that's the first thing that I thought was quite surprising. And then what's also interesting is that when you look at where female actually put their money, so where women invest, so women show that we're naturally inclined to think about sustainability, ESG. It's just naturally, we're naturally wired that way, most women. And so what's interesting to see is that actually, if we empower more women to become investors, automatically it will unlock finance into ESG, because, as I said, women invest better and they're naturally inclined to ESG topics. So there's just such a simple realization, right? It's like so simple. You just empower more women to become investors, then automatically more capital will flow into sustainability and ESG. So I think that's just such a simple and huge opportunity.
No, absolutely. And I think it's something like less than 2% of all investment funds go to female founders. And I think one of the stats I read was sort of women are 85% more successful than the male counterparts, because of the way they view things, the longevity of the way they view the impact, or any investment for that matter. So, but I guess there was often topics around the trickle down of the people who were giving the money were very male orientated. So subconsciously they weren't always aware of the passions or the underlying. They couldn't connect with it subconsciously, so felt it wasn't worth investing in. So I know the lady who invented Canva. I mean, oh my God, what an incredible story. And she had 100 VCs say no.
Right. Actually, I'm not familiar with that story.
Oh, I'll send it to you. But she got refused by 100 investors, and in the end it was actually a female investor invested in her, and now she's literally one of the top 10 most successful business launches, and the value of the business is now in the billions. So yeah, just incredibly. And sometimes it's hard to hear those stories, because you think, yeah, we hear about the big wins, we don't hear about the 99 no's. And I think resilience, which I do believe women have, but I think that resilience gets knocked and knocked and knocked the more no's you get.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's a big, it's a big difference between somebody who's successful and who isn't, is really consistency and resilience. It really boils down to that. And you can see it everywhere. I mean, even I see it, myself, you read, oh, Forbes under 30, da, da, da. These are all actually initiatives that I tried to do and failed, but I'm still here. So these are all, these awards I received, they're on companies and initiatives that I was driving forward, that actually I got awarded for, but they didn't end up by working, in the sense that they weren't financial successes. However, I'm still here and I'm still trying. So I find it also funny when, oh, you've done this, you've done that. Actually, I tried to do a lot of things. Not all of them succeeded, but when you're as yourself, when you're working for something bigger, it doesn't matter. You're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll just try again. I'll put my ego aside and I'll just get started again and try a different way.
Yeah, and I think part of that is we need to share more about the failures, and because when we're at the bottom and when we fail, we learn so much. I mean, I a couple of years ago was trying to raise funds for a kind of a regenerative agriculture marketplace. And those lowest moments and those moments of no's, and it just taught me so many things. Whereas if I'd have just had it handed on my plate, I wouldn't have the in-depth knowledge, the risk assessments, the long-term view analysis that now really I could put myself in front of any investor. There's not a question or objection that I couldn't nail you on. So I think we need that. We need to share those. LinkedIn's a great community, but equally we don't see very many, I've really screwed up here, or this investment hasn't worked, because we just naturally want to show our more positive side.
Definitely. And that's actually it actually drives into a topic that I also wanted to discuss, that has helped me in this journey of working on projects where you're sometimes hitting a wall and feeling, oh, what am I going to do, and feeling discouraged. So I have this silent retreat practice called Vipassana, which is basically 10 days of silence. It's a non-profit that organizes that. It's originally a Buddhist practice. And basically for 10 days, you are in silence, so you're not allowed to speak. And what happens across these 10 days is that the voices in your head become much louder because there's nothing else around you. And basically what you learn is to actually observe instead of getting wrapped up into whatever emotion you're in. So, if you're raising for a regenerative agriculture project and, it's not working the way you want to, you might get, emotional and feel down and so on. And so what the practice helps you is actually just watch these emotions and not get sucked into it. So the difference is that you will still get upset or worried or stressed over something, as we all do. But instead of feeling like, oh, my life is over, what am I going to do? Instead of listening to that voice that is telling you that, oh my God, nothing is working, you can actually just take a bit of a step back and look at it and be like, okay, this is, Rhona being a little bit down because obviously things are not going her way right now, but, things are going to change. It's just an instant, and you have kind of that distance to your emotions, which for me have been extremely helpful as an investor. One of the main mistakes that investors make is for example, when you invest in stock exchange, is that you sell too fast or you sell too early because you're emotional, right? You react to what the market might be saying, and so this practice has helped me to be less emotional, which has really helped both investing and just in general in terms of having more resilience in projects. So I wanted to share that as a practice, as an investor practice. Is a bit unusual, but very helpful. Yeah, no,
I'm really intrigued by that, because somebody who's not known for being quiet. How often do you do that? Do you do it like once a year, or just when you feel you need that top up?
So the retreat is 10 days, but like everything, it's a practice. So if you stop practicing it, you kind of lose that muscle. And so, so you have to practice every day.
Oh, wow. So do you dedicate a certain amount of time to silence?
Exactly. Every day, even if, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's supposed to be 1 hour, but sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes. But there's still a moment to just be like, okay, let's just take a step back and not get so caught up into whatever it might be, whether it's, worries over your children or worries over the planet, are we going to blow it up, or, whatever it might be. So you have a bit of time to be like, okay, let's just take a step back. I'm fine. This is going to pass. And it's extremely helpful as an impact investor to have that practice, so that you don't get too, caught up into whatever daily anxiety or worry might be.
You can imagine, actually, it's got a lot of benefits just holistically around life and challenges and, all that, whether it's taking time out in nature, going for a walk in the woods or whatever. So God, honestly, if I said to anybody who knows me, I'm going to do a 10-day silence retreat, I think they would literally fall off a cliff. But I'm really intrigued by that. So, okay, well, can you think of maybe one or two things that fundamentally shifted for you after the first time you did it, that kind of changed how you invested? What were the one or two things that really you noticed a difference?
The first thing is, so as I mentioned, I'm a very emotional person. So I could get very excited about something. So if I would see an investment that I find like, my heart gets excited. I'm like, oh my God, there's this incredible opportunity to do something in water in India. And I could be, first check in, and I could help this entrepreneur, and I could get super excited and be like, okay, boom, I'll put my money down. Without having really thoughtfully, looked at the due diligence and be more reflective. And so one good way in which it has helped me is to, feel my excitement, notice, great, excitement is important, right? It is important to have passion and be excited about the project you invested in. But let's take a step back. Let's breathe. Let's look at the numbers. Let's sit with it for a little bit. Is this really, do the numbers make sense? Is the person really worth your trust? So I think that's an example of,
Yeah. Amazing. I remember I got a great piece of advice from a guy who works doing quite a lot in purpose. Great guy, Alan River, and he's based in Australia. And one of the things I always do is I always walk very quickly. I talk quickly, I walk quickly, I do everything quickly. And he said, next time you go for a walk in the woods, slow it right down to the point where you're barely walking. And I felt a bit of a prat the first time I did it. But actually, it really was so empowering just to slow down and embrace everything around you, the sights, the smells, the sounds, all of that. So yeah, I can imagine the silence has a very similar impact. Awesome. So listen, in terms of one of the topics that I wanted to cover with you is you'd said that actually you only need to mobilize 3.5% of the population to actually create a social movement. Can you explain more about what you mean by that, and how do we do it?
Absolutely. So this is actually something that I learned quite recently. I was in New York City for Climate Week just a few weeks ago, and there was a presentation by the Climate Emergency Fund. I know you're familiar with them.
Yes.
So for those who are not, they are the ones that I'm sure you've read in the news, in the Guardian or New York Times, that there's some activists that basically glue themselves to artwork. So, they're in the National Gallery, they're very disruptive. So a lot of people dislike them. I personally adore them. And basically what they do is they're just, they're doing activism. They're trying to bring attention on the big important climate topics and decisions. And they're doing that by being very disruptive, which is by gluing themselves to very important artwork in very important museums. And so, as I said, a lot of people view them as disruptive, but they're actually working for the Climate Emergency Fund. They're all volunteers.
Right.
The Climate Emergency Fund is one of the organizations that is leading on this front. And what I did not know is there's a Harvard study that came out a few years ago that basically says that they've looked at all the social movements across history, so women's rights movements, civil rights movements, and what they've noticed is that in each of these movements, you need at least 3.5% of the population to be in dissent in order to create a tipping point in policy, and in the social movement in general. And so for me, that was quite interesting, because if you think about it, 3.5% is actually quite a small number. And so I'm a big, I really think activism is important.
Yeah.
I think it's a very important part of the puzzle. It's not the only solution, but what we're doing, impact investing is another part of it. Building alternatives, funding alternatives to the current system. But it's interesting to see that throughout history, the movements that have really shifted things usually engage at least 3.5% of the population. So I find that I
wonder how far we might be away from that. So if we take, what are we, 8.6 7 billion in the world right now. So I wonder how far we are from that number, from everyone, from the extreme activism right through to people like you, to me, people working in this space. I don't know the answer to that, but it would be interesting to put a number on it.
Exactly. But that specific stat gave me a lot of hope, and made me realize, actually, we're not that far away. And I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of, if you think about, actually, this is not impact investment, it's more donation, because if you fund activism, obviously it's not an investment, it's a donation. But it actually has a huge ROI in terms of creating change, because if you think about it, all the people that are activists, they're volunteers, right? So if you think about the ROI of your donation, it's pretty massive, because there's no cost at all. And these people are extraordinarily brave, and it's a great way to get a lot of attention on a very important topic in a way that people can't ignore them, right? Because museums have to be shut, and exhibitions have to be paused because somebody. It is pretty aggressive, but I think it's powerful, and I think we've reached a point where we need to be as aggressive and as disruptive as these guys are being. So I'm personally a big proponent of that.
Yeah, we have quite a lot here in the UK that are doing, across outside, anywhere that potentially fracking or oil contracts or super gluing themselves across roads. And it is a hot debate here, but I think.
What do you think?
Depending on what media, from those that will say, well, they're stopping people getting to work, and the ambulance and the fire services and all these sorts of things. But like you say, I think strategic activism for the right cause that has the right powerful message behind it, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm. As long as it's non-violent, I think
No, absolutely. And I'm safe to say there may be a few scuffles here when it's tried to be broken up, but generally it is. But, I think even here in the UK, they're trying to ban groups of people protesting on anything, and it's just getting really, really silly. And lots of people, are kind of really reacting to that. But you mentioned a word earlier, that the stat drove you to have hope. Now, one of the things that I often struggle with is kind of climate anxiety. There's so much to do, so many amazing things to support. How do you get yourself out of being paralyzed, or how can you help the listeners deal with that?
Mm-hmm. I think we're in times where it's very overwhelming. If you look at the news, what's happening in the world, the war in Ukraine, like the energy crisis. There's just so much happening that it's very easy to fall into climate anxiety, and I fall into that myself as well. And sometimes, I'm sure you've experienced the same, I can feel very paralyzed, and like, is it even worth doing this work? Is it just, should I just be going to the pub next door and get drunk instead of focusing on all this important work? Like, is it really going to make a difference? You know what I mean? Am I really using my energy in the right way? Is it going to make any difference at all? Is it really going to move the needle? And I think what gets me out of that is a few things. So first, I can't reason myself out of that right away, because when you're in an anxiety, you're not really thinking straight anymore. So the first thing is getting in your body. So I need to either shake or dance or walk or run, or it has to be something physical to kind of snap out of, the anxiety, the anxious cycle. So that's the first thing, is like getting in my body. So any of these, dance, shake, move, walk, run, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just looking at history and realizing that throughout history, it's always been, at the end of the day, a small group of very committed people that have really created change. So if you look at Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, all the people that have made a difference, at the end of the day, it was a small group of very committed people who worked tirelessly towards focusing on one issue, and were able to create a shift. So I think that's the more rational explanation. And so these two things. So I would say, getting in my body, getting in movement is the first thing. And the second one is realizing, just looking at history and seeing how we've been able to go through extraordinary social change, and how it has worked in the past. So there's no reason why it shouldn't work today.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes, I guess for me, I try and summarize it when my head's in that space by going, I believe and feel that I'm on the right side of where we need to go. And actually, if anything that I do, be that with my Prince's Trust mentoring, with my Education Africa, whatever it might be, if someone can say to me, what you're doing is creating harm, anger, upset, violence, then I would walk away in a second. That's how I try and deal with it. I try and say, I feel I'm on the right, I know I'm on the right side, even if, even doing these podcasts, LinkedIn posts, my children seeing, the changes that we're making in the house to be as regenerative and sustainable as we can. That's the place I want to be.
Exactly.
But it's that balance of, see, often I say I'm not an activist because I'm not trying to work with people to ram it down their throats and put the fear of God into them. But it's more about, there's so much amazing hope and stories and technology and people out there that it's not as scary as you think it is. And imagine a wonderful world where, if 40% of our GDP relies on nature, what are you going to do when that's gone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's such exciting work. Just being a part of it, hearing what can be done, what is actually already being done. And I think also because the media focuses a lot on what's not going well, we also get a bit of I know things are not going well, but I don't think a lot of people know the actual solutions and how they can be scaled, and all the things. You and me, we see it every day because we're really in the field. But I don't think everybody knows about this stuff. Otherwise, they would be doing more about it. So yeah, it's extremely exciting work once you see the solutions and how they can be scaled, and the role that you, me, and everybody else can play. It's like, I find it incredible. And like you said, at least you don't know if it's going to work, but at least you feel like you're on the right side of the fence, that you're contributing, you're helping, and enjoying. For me, is a big part of enjoying the ride, and every day, having a bit of fun every day. For me, I'm a big proponent of that. Because if I'm not having a bit of fun every day, what's the point of all of doing it?
100%. I'm very well known for tenacity and humour, stroke sarcasm. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we will do and we'll get wrong. And I know recently I was looking at the NEOM project in Saudi, and there was quite a bit of bad press about some of the technology. And I thought, well, actually, if you take a step back, if everything that they do, just 70%, 50% of it works at that scale, how empowering will that be for the world in terms of investment and confidence? Now, I'm putting aside human rights and other areas that Saudi may or do have, but actually from a sustainability point, the technology that they're going to deliver at scale could be groundbreaking. So I think we've got to give people permission to put their heads above the parapet. And one of my real frustrating points in sometimes in LinkedIn and other social medias is someone tries to do something and they get slagged off, and it's, well, you should have done this. Well, hold on a minute. It might not work. And we've got to encourage people to take that leap and share with the communities and the industries, what, we tried it, but it didn't work. But this is what we've learned, and this is what we'll do different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sharing transparently, all the roadblocks, all the issues is so helpful. I think it's a big part of reporting on all of that, just being really honest in terms of what's worked, what hasn't worked, and not having any shame around that, and just being really straightforward. That's a huge part, because like you're saying, it's very easy to be critical, and it is very important to be critical, especially today that everybody can self-proclaim to be sustainable or working in ESG, as we know. The smarter we become, the more transparent, the more educated, the more we try things and fail, the more we'll know, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And like you said, being open about these topics is so important. And I agree, it's a shame to shut people down when they're trying something that is obviously imperfect, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
we are going to need hybrid solutions, and we are going to need transitional periods. So I think, let's try and support that where we can. I wanted to move on a little bit in terms of, if the people out there listening, specifically female listeners, but anyone really who's thinking about becoming an angel investor. So can you just define for people, what's the difference between angel, seed, VCs, just very top level, and then integration of how top tier impact works? What could people do, and where could they go?
Absolutely. So I think, I don't know about you, but before I became an angel investor only 2.5 years ago, and before that, I always imagined that to become an investor, you needed to have millions of dollars in the bank, and that it was completely, out of my league. And, I needed to first make a lot of money, and then eventually, maybe one day, maybe in my late 60s, I'll have enough money to become an investor. And then what I didn't realize is actually, so to be an angel investor, which is basically an investor as an individual, when you're not associated with any organization, as opposed to be a venture capital investor or an institutional investor where you're linked with another organization. So an angel, you're just investing on your own. So it's super simple. Basically, you only need 5-10K to get started when you go in very, very early at seed level. And so that's something that I didn't know. And when I found out that, with a check that, yes, it is something, 10K is not nothing, but it's not a million. I didn't realize that you can get started. You can start backing entrepreneurs. You can follow them, and then you can, make a bigger check later if you can, when they're later in their journey. But I think for me, it was a huge wake-up call when I realized, I can be an angel investor with as little as 10K. So that was a big epiphany. And I think not a lot of women know that. I mean, I think men obviously, more used to speaking about finance and investments is just more part of the social norm and social habits, while us, not necessarily. And I think that's changing a lot. So what I wanted to mention is that, yes, with only 10K, you can support an incredible female entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in general working on some super important issues, and be part of that journey. And you can, follow their progress. You can support them. You can advise them. And even if you don't know what you're doing at the beginning, that's fine, because you're going to learn, and you're going to get smarter as you go. And I think it's just such an incredible way to create change, because if you look at, so as you know, companies, once they're listed, once they're public, capital is much easier to get, right? But when they're private, when they're still getting started, that's where there's the biggest risk. And that's really where your money can make the biggest difference. And so I find that extremely empowering, to be aware of that and to get started. That's how I got started. And I personally, I don't know about you, but I love being an angel investor. I think it's one of the most rewarding, exciting ways to create impact.
Yeah, and I think I've looked at it as well as, well, it's just an alternative to a pension. We sit there every month putting money away. How about we look at it this way? And there's a lot of risk, and I think there's a mindset shift to be able to do it. But also, I think, people can get involved in impact investing at a much smaller scale. There's things called microloans. You can support a child or a lady in a smaller community in a developing country from as little as £10-15. And that creates a business, and often you get the £10-15 back, but you've created, an entire business for individual and their family and community. So I'd love people to realise that even if they didn't go out and get hammered one weekend, and they, went and spent, £20 on, on a microloan, I think there's lots of ways to get involved in investing. Like you say, just that awareness, it doesn't have to be a large amount of money. And I've never invested large amounts of money. They've always been very, very small, on the view that I could afford it at that moment in time, but the payback could be way greater than any pension or any, hope I'd have had of maybe even earning that in a year. So it's a risk I'm comfortable with. But there's lots of different ways I think people can get involved.
And it's also a different feeling to be so clear on where your money is going and so involved in how it's invested and what your money is doing versus, distantly investing in a pension fund, not really being so close to actually how the money is used. So it's a very different feeling as an investor. If you just invest in a few stocks and you see what happens, that's great too, but it's a very different feeling than, really following an entrepreneur, understanding what they're working on. Like two different worlds.
Yeah, and I guess it's only really been in the last 5 years that I've understood and transitioned my pensions, because you just go, oh, I put in 4, they put in 10, whatever, and you don't think about it, you don't look at it, you don't, we're not educated in how to do that. And then when you realize you're invested in fossil fuels, tobacco, and all these other things, you go, oh, what? I mean, obviously I've moved mine and changed them now. I love that. I love the fact that, like you say, to know where your money's going and build that bond with somebody is really empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wonderful. I really recommend everybody to just try it out, because it's such a rewarding and exciting experience, and it's actually pretty accessible, and most people don't know that.
No, I know. Education is key, isn't it? So, well, listen, I could talk more on this, because anything around empowering, I've got 2 daughters, so anything around empowering women, the planet, is a huge passion of mine. So Helena, thank you so much for your time. I know you're normally based in Singapore, aren't you, but you're in Switzerland right now, so thank you for joining me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Rhona. I really enjoyed it. It was very uplifting and fun, and I'm excited to keep doing this work and see how we can do more of it and keep everybody excited and empowered to notice that they can do something about it. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Helena.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rhona Morel podcast. Have an awesome day, and see you next time.